Hey everybody, Reef Girl here. A lot of planning went into the power management for the Red Sea Reefer XL425, and we actually mapped all of the power in our house and figured out which plugs were on which circuits. Once that was done, then we had to figure out how many pieces of equipment we had with plugs and where the heck we were going to plug them all in. So here's what the list looked like as we went through all of the equipment and tried to figure the best way to do this. If you've seen some of my prior videos about my 2 nano tanks, you might recall the rat's nest of wires and equipment and just plain everything that was all around them. It looked like a bomb site. It felt like a bomb site. I had to clear the dining room table off every night for dinner. So now I have this, and the only cables you can actually see are those 2 wires on the floor that are for power bars plugged into the wall outlet, and the channel on the wall for the light, and that's it. And I absolutely love it. Let's start with a drawer full of pump controllers. You can see on the left there, I've got the cabinet drawer pulled open. The pump controllers are laid out in the drawer on an angle to allow clearance for all of the cables. We have a saltwater pump, a return pump, and an RODI pump. The RODI pump and the saltwater pump are in the basement. 6 cables exit the drawer on the left-hand side, and 3 cables come back in on the right-hand side. Of those 6 cables at the left, 3 are controller cables and 3 are power cables. The controller cables go directly to the pumps. The power cables go through the back of the drawer and are attached to the transformers that are mounted on the wall. I have a better view of that coming up. The power cables come out of the transformers and come back into the drawer, and they're plugged in here on the right. Well, at least 2 of them are, the saltwater pump and the RODI pump. The 3rd pump that's plugged in there is the cobalt that's in the sump, and it's what I use to do the water changes. And this is where I can switch it on and off. You see there's a return pump control, but no return pump switch. And that's because the return pump is actually plugged into the battery backup. We made a decision that it would be really important to keep the water flowing in the tank as much as possible, and also keep it moving through the sump because that's where the heater is. So because these are DC pumps with a low wattage, we decided to plug the return pump into the battery backup along with one 300-watt heater. This would allow us to maintain at least water flow for some considerable time during a power outage. We have flow in the tank above with the random flow generator. I love this thing. So we have like 6, 7, 8, 9 cables to manage here. And let me show you how we did that. Here is the first secret in our wire management plan. You can see we got a whole lot of wires back here. So first let's demonstrate what our little secret method looks like when it's working. The drawer is in the open position, and now we're going to push the drawer closed, and you can see that all of those cables that come from all of those controllers slide right back into the space that's behind the cabinet. Check it out, there's a metal plate attached to a drawer slide that's fastened to the underside of the cabinet lid. The back of the drawer is open, so the wires are free to move in and out. We mounted a cheap metal towel bar from the hardware store at the very back to hold those wires up so they wouldn't drag along the top of the ATO container, which of course is immediately underneath here. There's nothing between the bottom of these wires and the top of the ATO container. Watching that video, my husband noticed a couple of the wires were not moving smoothly, so he checked into it and was able to fix them, so now they move perfectly. There are a ridiculous amount of wires in this cabinet, but you really can't see them. They're not obvious. We used pretty much every wire fastener and little trick known to man to tidy them up. There was a lot of this over the course of several weeks as pieces of equipment were added and moved and changed and added again. So to begin with and get the tank up and running, we had to just mount a couple of power bars just so we could plug everything in. So we did that, put them near the ceiling because the idea was to run all of the wires along the ceiling so they wouldn't be crossing in the middle of this space. You can see how disorganized it looks, and that's because the wires aren't properly managed yet. They're just there so that I can use them. Once we got to managing the wires, things started to get tidied up a little bit. Adding labels really helped, and that green tape is a temporary stuff. Got replaced with really nice black and white labels, and this is how it looks now. I'm really pleased with it. All of my flow is managed on the right hand side, so if I want to turn all the flow off in the tank, I simply hit the power bar switch, and then all of the other equipment where I need to turn it on and off regularly for maintenance and things like that is on the left hand side. In the right hand power bar, the one with all the flow, I also have a timer plugged in, and plugged into this timer are the lights for the algae scrubber and the sump. That way I can have them on and off at certain times through the day, and in fact right now they're turned off between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. It's plugged into the one outlet on the power bar that's always on, so it doesn't matter if I shut off the flow to my tank, it'll still keep running. And this white cord that you see here is for a fan. We found there was a lot of moisture building up in the cabinet over the sump, and so decided that we should probably put a fan in there. So we just got a cheap one from Walmart. So taking a quick detour to look at the sump, here's the fan. It's clamped onto the far wall of the ATO container that we don't use for water. We use it kind of for storage and equipment. And it's securely on the back there. You can see I've also got my Tom's Aqua Lifter pump at the back, and that's for the ATO. It's hanging on that glass wall. It works really well to take care of air movement in here and keeps everything circulating. In this sump light, I just have a regular grow bulb. It's not red or anything. And down here I have my ghetto Chaeto algae corral. It's pretty sketchy. I'm going to have to do something about that fairly soon. The stuff has about doubled in size over the last couple of weeks. So it's set up pretty nicely. I'm quite pleased with it. The fan works really well, and I think it might also help with my pH. And while we're in the sump, I'll show you something else we did that's a little bit different. This blue thing here is a hose clamp that's meant to clamp on the side of your aquarium when you're using a hose to fill it. You put the hose through there and you don't need to hold it. It will hold it in place, but we're using it to manage cords. One is the heater, one is the UV sterilizer pump, and one is from the return pump. It's the controller cable. So it's a great way to use this thing. The cords just stay in place. They travel up through the sump and out the port at the back, where they go around to the other side of the cabinet and are plugged in. It was a great way to use this particular piece of equipment. Okay, detour over. Now let's get back into the other side of the cabinet again. We had to install a shelf to accommodate the transformer that came with the UV sterilizer, because the European plug, the way this thing is designed, it cannot sit on a flat surface. That plug has to hang over an edge. And so the wire shelf was put in, and it was a bonus because that's also where we put the skimmer power block and the Kessel light power block. So that was a really fortunate coincidence that we were able to use it for both of those things. So the wires all go up to the ceiling and they're run through these gray channels. There's a removable lid that snaps in place on top, and all along the edges are little plastic teeth that can be broken away to allow a wire to go in and out. And this works great for maintenance because anything can be removed really easily. And it just so happens the other day I had to take the algae scrubber pump out for some maintenance, and it worked really well. Here's the battery backup, and what we have plugged in there is the Kessel light on a non-backup outlet, and one heater and the return pump on 2 backup outlets. We also have a couple of spare outlets. Did I mention that there are a total of 27 outlets available to me here? It's crazy. and I think I have maybe 5 remaining, so that's pretty good. And the location of the battery backup is on the bottom shelf of the cabinet in the back right corner, and I've put it on this rigid plastic placemat so that I can pull on the placemat to get access to the cords and plugs and power switches. It's a very simple matter of pulling the placemat forward and the battery backup comes right with it to make for easy access. This area in the center here is where the shelf is that my husband made, and that's so I would have extra surface area to put things like my dosing pump. You can see the containers here all ready for the mixes for the balling light method. The shelf is removable, so it's quite easy to take it out and work on the wiring if necessary. And what I'll show you next is all hidden now, of course, but it's a quick look at cable management behind the tank. Those thick white cables are heavy-duty appliance extension cords, which we needed because the cord length of some of the equipment just wasn't enough to reach where we needed to plug it in. They're all clamped on the back of the tank to take stress off of the connections. The hoses are the supply hose for salt water from the basement and the drain hose for the cobalt when I pump water out during a water change. Ooh, and what's this? Another secret coming up. And last but not least, and this is probably my favorite thing of all the genius ideas my husband came up with, if you look to the right of the tank, you'll see a control panel that slides back behind the tank. Here's a look at what is actually behind the aquarium. Hoses, controller cables, and those drawer slides on the wall are for that sliding panel. Allow me to demonstrate. I just pull on the lovely ceramic knob and everything slides out. There is my high door smart level, that's the ATO. I love this thing. And my pH monitor. I have my high door smart wave. There are 2 power heads plugged into this and they alternate on and off for 5 seconds at a time. There's my Jabo WP10 controller. And finally my Jabo RW4 controller. The background is painted black to kind of hide the wires. The wires really aren't fastened down, just in case we need to remove the controllers for any reason. It looks pretty slick. And it takes very little effort to slide it back into place behind the cabinet. One feature I really like about this slider is the lid. It's only held in place with Velcro, so if I ever need access to the back of the sliders, the back of the panel, or even need to remove it entirely from the sliders, it easily pops off. There's a tight space behind the aquarium. There's the silver transformer casing for the Kessel light. You can see it there. And so very, very tight space. But everything's clamped in place. It was very carefully measured. So this panel can slide in and out without any impediments. And if I want to check quickly how things are doing, I just open the right-hand cabinet door and look through the hole in the back of the cabinet to check the lights. You can see the flashing lights back there. I look often at the ATO just to make sure everything's all working properly. So there you have it, the secrets behind my nice, tidy setup for my new tank. It was a lot of fun doing the brainstorming and searching through electrical supply and auto supply places for weird and strange parts. Although I'm sure I had a lot more fun than my husband, who ended up having to jam himself into really, really small spaces like that cabinet in order to get things set up properly.